What's up, knuckleheads? Coach Marcus here at the world famous CrossFit Knuckleheads, and today we want to talk about the mother of all functional movement, the squat. Specifically, we want to talk about the things we do to prepare before we ever even get under the barbell for a squat. So for the purposes of this video, we're considering that you already know good squatting technique. We're not going to cover the mechanics of the squat in this video. We'll do a separate video for that. But instead, we're going to talk about some tips and techniques and practices, some general guidelines that I personally use and I use with my athletes to prep our bodies before we squat to make sure that we can get into the proper positions and utilize that good technique. Knuckleheads, personally for me, I like to start with some static stretching, and I start with some very basic stretches. So we're going to start with a stretch that is going to hit the hamstrings and glutes, and it's just a simple basic standing forward fold. We're going to perform this stretch with our feet facing forward, underneath of our hips, knees are slightly bent, and I'm going to just simply flex at the hip, bringing my torso down towards the floor. Now, a lot of athletes will perform this stretch with the intention of touching their toes, so they will round the back to get down and touch their toes. The intention of this stretch is not to touch my toes, it's to stretch my hamstrings and my glutes. So my philosophy here is train as you fight. If I'm not going to have this flexed, rounded back while I perform my squat, then why would I want to do that while I'm prepping and stretching for my squat? So I like to keep that nice, solid, neutral midline, like I'm going to keep in my squat, and just bring my torso down towards my legs. You can think of this as like an RDO. So if we're thinking of that standing forward fold as sort of an RDO or a straight leg deadlift, then we can go along with that and add a barbell in. Okay, starting at the top, I'm going to perform that same stretch. Again, just like an RDL, I'm pushing my hips back, keeping the barbell close to my legs, and just letting the barbell bring me down. I can then squeeze my glutes and hamstrings to pull myself back up to the extended position, flexing. The next stretch that I really like for hamstrings is a half front split. To do the half front split, I'm going to take a lunge position with my knee on the ground. I'm going to extend my front leg out. I can actually zip back onto this back leg, and then again, I'm just going to be taking my torso down towards the floor. You're really going to feel that stretch pretty quickly in the hamstring. What I like about this stretch is that if I want to add in a stretch into the calf and the Achilles, I can simply grab the toe, give it a slight pull back, nothing extreme, and you're really going to feel that stretch all through the posterior section of that front leg. So I'm going to want to perform this stretch probably 20 seconds each leg, but from this stretch, I can go straight into my next stretch. So my next stretch is going to hit my hips. And that's going to be a dragon pose. There are different variations of dragon pose, but to do that, I'm just going to simply go back up to my lunge position, and I'm going to make that leg that's behind me, I'm just going to make that leg long, and I'm going to sink my hips down towards the floor. Now you may have to change the position of where your front foot sits, but the idea is to feel the stretch through the anterior or the front portion of my back leg. I'm going to feel it into my hip flexor, and I'm also going to feel it in my groin and in that hip of that front leg that's posted up. Different variations here. I can actually drive the knee over my toe and get a stretch through the calf and Achilles, okay? Or I can try to take my elbow down towards my foot, which is known more as lizard, and that's gonna really get more of my hip involved. Again, I'm gonna wanna perform some variation of this stretch, about 20 seconds each leg. All right, guys, so we have hit the hamstrings a couple of different ways. We have hit our hips with some variations of some dragon pose stuff. Now we gotta hit one last thing, and really not looked at very closely, I think, a lot, is the calves, the Achilles, the ankles. Okay, we really need to have good ankle range of motion, so we need to hit some stretching up with that. What I like to do is use the rig. So I hold on to the rig, just get myself down into a deep squat. And then what I'm gonna do is use the rig as leverage. I'm gonna hang on to it with my left hand, my left elbow's on top of my left knee, and I'm gonna use that leverage to really drive my left knee over top of my toe. Keeping the heel on the ground, super important that we keep the heel on the ground. I'm keeping the heel on the ground, and then I feel that stretch all through my calf, okay? Easily I can just switch over to the other side, same thing, again, using the rig for leverage. I'm gonna put my elbow on top of my knee and really drive my knee over top of my toe. Feel a lot of stretch in the calf. Okay, both sides, 10, 20 seconds. We can switch back and forth a couple of times. And then while I'm down here, I'm gonna just kind of move through my hips, move through my ankles, kind of get everything warmed up and ready to move. All right guys, so we've done some static stretching that has allowed us to increase our range of motion and get into better positions. Now we need to make sure that the right muscles are firing. We need to make sure that the connection is made between our brain and these main movers that we want to use in the squat. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on the glutes and the hips. And in order to do that, one of my favorite ways is to use these little guys. These guys, a whole set of these on Amazon for about 10 bucks. Super cheap, very helpful. And we're going to use these to perform sumo walks and monster walks. We're going to start with the sumo walk. So to do the sumo walk, I'm gonna put my band around my ankles. Now, when you're doing this, my shoe's untied, so I'm gonna take a second to tie that. When you're doing this, if this movement is too difficult for you, then moving the band up above your knees will decrease the difficulty. That'll actually decrease the levers that we're using, so it'll be a little easier. But again, if you buy a whole set, you're gonna get some bands that are light, medium, heavy, and even extra heavy. But we're gonna start with the band around our ankles. I wanna set my hips back when I start, and then I'm going to just do some lateral movement, okay? I'm performing this movement by driving my back leg into the ground, forcing my back leg into the ground to be able to drive my other leg forward. I don't wanna take big steps. I wanna just slide that front foot across the ground. And again, I'm focusing on driving the weight into the back leg. We're gonna do this for about 25 feet one direction. While I'm still facing the same direction, I'm gonna move the opposite way, about 25 feet. And we're gonna do this for 2 to 3 sets. Okay guys, next, monster walk. Monster walk, same thing. We've got the band around our ankles. I wanna keep tension on the band, so I've gotta have my feet probably just outside of shoulder width, maybe a little bit wider, but I want them about in my squat stance. And I'm gonna take little bitty steps, keeping that same distance in the band. Again, we're gonna do this for about 25 feet going forward. And 25 feet going back. Again, I'm focusing on keeping tension on the band, okay? If I bring my feet together, this is too easy. Gotta have my feet spread apart, tension on the band, little small steps. Again, we'll probably do this for about 2 to 3 sets. All right guys, so we've hit some flexibility with some static stretching. We have activated the right muscles and made that connection between our brain and our muscles, and we have the right things firing. The last piece of the puzzle for me, super important, is stability. We need to be able to stabilize the load in our hips where it's intended to be. If not, then what happens is we stabilize the load in our lower backs or our knees. Hence the reason why you see people with poor squatting technique end up with knee problems and back problems. So the best way to work our stabilization is with single leg movements, and they can be really basic, just like lunges. We can just use 2 sets of 10 alternating legs lunges as a good warm up. Athletes, when your coaches, when your athletes are performing these sorts of movements, pay attention to how they're moving. I mean, if they're really shaky on a lunge, they have really poor stability in their hips, and that should be a main focus before they do any heavy squatting. Another thing we could do, maybe a little simpler for some older athletes, or some people who can't perform lunges as well, is we can do just a box step up. So again, they're just gonna do this is a single leg movement, driving up on top of the box with that single leg. So just alternate, driving up on top of that box with a single leg. Again, we could perform 2 sets of 10. These are great not only as warm-ups, but as accessories to our main lift as well. So I really like to do some unilateral stuff as an accessory after my main lift. Okay. Lastly, one of the movements that I really like for this is just balancing on a single leg. We can call it single leg RDLs or however you want to look at it, but really I start most people out just trying to balance and stand on a single leg. So we want the weight to the outside of our foot. We want our knee tracking over the outside of our foot. We want to sit our hips back a little bit into this athletic stance and just try and stand on one leg. Once the athlete can stand on both legs pretty well there, then we can get them to try to just touch their toes through this movement. So my back leg's moving back, trying to touch my toes and back up to the top. Down, trying to touch my toes, back up to the top. I want to make sure my hips stay squared to the ground. So look at the athlete's toes of his back foot. If his toes are pointing out, he's opening up his hips. He's cheating that movement a little bit. So the hips need to stay square to the ground. Toes in the back leg are pointing down towards the ground and back up. Okay. For some older athletes or athletes who can't quite do that yet, we can simply use the rig. So have the athlete stand near the rig, balance on that single leg, let them use the rig to know that they're going to be okay, and then have them try to move down towards that, touching their toes. As they go along, try to encourage them to balance more and more on their own and not touch the rig, but it's there for their safety. This is a great way to build stability in the hips, again, before we're squatting, and then we can use these same movements as accessories after we're done with our main lift. All right, guys, so nothing that we've shown here takes too much time. You should be able to move through all these movements in about 10, maybe 15 minutes at the most. So if you're a guy who's normally into the gym and under a barbell in less than 5 minutes, you may want to look at some of these tips and techniques to see if this can help you get primed and ready for better positions and better squats and to prevent injury. It's the small things we do in the gym that really add up to big improvements, so keep that in mind. If you guys like this information, please hit the like button, subscribe, comment below. We'd very much appreciate it. Again, I'm Coach Marcus for the world famous CrossFit Knuckleheads. I'm primed and ready, so I'm about to get my squat on. And until next time, I'll see you in the gym.